So with the NFL season last year, there was a lot of questions about if the NFL is rigged or not. There was a stat that came out that said over 70% of people think the NFL is rigged. But what I thought I could do in this video is talk about how the NFL and how gamblers could actually rig the sport if they wanted to. What is the pathway to rigging something? Because in a lot of these instances, there's actually a lot more hurdles than you might think when you just kind of take a first glance at it. So let's get into it. Let's talk about who could potentially rig an NFL game, and if you were to, how you would go about doing it. So that's what we're going to discuss in today's video. When it comes to rigging NFL games, it really could come from one of two places, right? Either it could come from the NFL itself, or it could come from gambling. And so let's start off with gambling, then we'll get into the NFL itself. If you wanted to rig an NFL game to make money, to place bets and make money, how would you go about doing it? Well, there actually have been a couple instances of this happening in other sports. Tim Donaghy probably being the most famous one in the NBA. Also, Benny Sillman was a person who got sentenced to jail for 4 years for betting on a college basketball game. One of the issues is every example you look at is going to be of someone getting caught. Have there been examples where someone got away with it? We don't know because they got away with it if they did, right? So you can only look at the examples of people who got caught. But looking at the examples of how people got caught can help us, as if we're trying to rig an NFL game, we have to know what to avoid. The Benny Sillman one is actually probably the biggest thing we have to avoid when we are going to be rigging an NFL game, because what essentially went wrong was it was a Arizona State University game. There was a large bet placed on a college basketball game, which was already a red flag. People know how bets go, and people know when there is a surprising amount of money on a specific team. And in fact, hardcore gamblers, when they see something like that, usually just avoid that game altogether. So then when players were shaving points and kind of clearly making some weird decisions, that set off a huge red flag, and it becomes pretty obvious, right? If someone bets a bunch of money on one game, and then it seems like people are doing something to affect the outcome of the game, you can put two and two together pretty easily, and that resulted in the investigation that resulted in jail time. For Tim Donaghy, the NBA guy who rigged games, for him, it was less about getting a bunch of money on one game, but he tried putting little amounts of money on a good amount of games. It started off as $2,000 per game, ultimately went up to $5,000 per game. It was a friend who would place the bets for him, but even with just that little amount of money consistently changing hands, that was enough to have it be a trend. And once you notice the trend, you could look into Tim Donaghy, who then the NBA realized he was actively making calls to help out a certain team in those games that ended up winning the bet for his friend. And because of that, they were, again, able to convict Donaghy and sentence him to jail. So, okay, we're rigging games with gambling. That's what we have to avoid. We can't go too often, and we can't be doing this every week, or people will notice. We also can't put too much money on it, or people will notice. It seems like the easiest way to get someone to rig a game would be an official. Officials can have major impacts on the game and don't make anywhere near as much as players do, right? You're not going to be able to pay off, like Justin Herbert had a horrible game, but you can't pay him off enough money to throw a game probably. He makes so much as is. But the average ref makes only $200,000, which is a ridiculous amount of money to make, but obviously, when we're talking NFL numbers, is basically poverty. And you wouldn't need to pay off the average ref. You could try to find the one who makes the least. The lowest ref makes around $100,000. Although, an important note is refs get a $30,000 to $50,000 bonus for working the Super Bowl. So this is something that I think we have to know, because here's where things get a little weird. If we're going to rig an NFL game, I think we would have to rig a big game like the Super Bowl. If you rig a random Thursday night game, Jacksonville Jaguars, Tennessee Titans, there's not going to be that much money showing up, not that many large bets. And so that means you couldn't place a huge bet, right? That was the Arizona State University thing. Is the first time there was one large bet, it just stood out like a sore thumb. You have to make sure that you have a lot of money changing hands. The best way to do that is the game where the most money changes hands. Over $1 billion was bet on Super Bowl 59. So for a ref, they have to decide it is worth it to go through with this plan. They're making, we'll say, $100,000, but you get a 30 to 50 grand bonus for working the Super Bowl. If you blow a Super Bowl, you're not getting another Super Bowl. You're not getting that bonus. Not to mention, if you get caught, you are going to jail and you are never going to be an NFL ref again. And as we talked about, they make good money. You're making a lot more doing that than you are working at a deli, right? That wasn't shade towards people who work at delis. I used to work at a deli. That's why that was the first job that popped in my head. But, it would be a big risk. So to take that big risk, you would need to make a good chunk of money. Here's how I think this would go if you wanted to rig a game this way, where first you have a ref. They get linked up with someone who has a bunch of money. This could be a billionaire, but to be honest, I actually don't even know if a billionaire would fully work, and here's why. That billionaire would then need to link up with, we'll say, 10 friends. That's not how many circles there are, but just, we'll say 10 people. Those people are then going to take money and bet different amounts of money in different areas, in different states, to hopefully collect all the winnings without arising suspicion. Because again, if one person just bets a huge amount of money, then that could be suspicious. So for the person who has the money in this equation, I actually think we would need to get like a mob boss or someone of that nature to do it, because this is an illegal thing and you have to trust 10 people, possibly in different states, because if 10 people from Albuquerque all bet a large amount of money on a football game, that would still get flagged. People would notice that. And then if they all have mob connections, that would be an issue. So it would have to be like a really successful mob boss who has like franchises in different states, I guess. I don't know how the mob works. Is that how it works? I don't know. But that seems to be like the best way to do it. You get 10 goons to bet, let's say a total of $10 million. The goons each get $10K each for making the bet. So you take $100,000 out of it and you win roughly $900,000, probably a little bit less, but depending on where you put the points on and everything. And that can be split between the mob boss and the ref. That's the best way you could pull this off. It would be difficult. And again, you'd have to really pay attention to not making it clear that the ref and the mob boss have talked to each other. You'd have to somehow find a way where you can get 10 people across the country who don't have clear connections to each other to all coordinate this plan together. And because of that, it really could be difficult. Again, the fact that this is illegal makes this a lot tougher, because if someone hears about it and they say something, then that's why you'd be in trouble. So that's kind of why you need established criminals, probably. So it would be difficult, but not impossible. I was also curious, could you get a player to rig a game like this for gambling purposes? That's happened in basketball. Jonte Porter, Terry Rozier recently have been accused of that at the very least. Well, again, it would be difficult. The lowest NFL player makes $800,000 a year, which is a large jump from the ref. Although it's worth mentioning that the lowest NFL player does not have the shelf life that a ref has. If you're a ref, you might be making, $100,000 a year, but then you might be having a 40-year career where you can make a ton of money. Probably not 40 years. I don't think there's a lot of 65-year-old refs, but you get the idea. You could have a very long established career with that job compared to NFL, which sometimes you only have a couple years. So that's maybe an in, right? Let's say we go to a long snapper who, the reality is, if you're a long snapper, if you mess up a few snaps, you're going to get caught. The reality is, if you're a player making $800,000 and you screw up the Super Bowl and cost your team to lose, you're going to get caught. But maybe you find a long snapper who's already about to get caught. Maybe he already screwed up a couple long snaps, but the team is sticking with them because, hey, that at this point it's going to be tough to find a new one. Let's just keep the guy we have, and let's go up to him and offer him a cut instead of what the ref is getting. Maybe he can get a few $100,000 on his way out, as he's probably going to be out of the NFL anyway. Again, you would still have the logistical difficulties of just getting the bets in and making sure that no one finds out that you're all working together, but there is maybe an in there. The biggest difficulty, I think, with this one and with the ref one is that neither one of these fully guarantee that you're going to successfully change the outcome of the game. The Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl, no matter who you paid off, the Eagles were winning that game, right? So there always is that X factor, and then you lose $1 million and you risk jail time on top of it. That's the issue. So you could try to rig a game this way. It is going to take a lot to be able to actually pull it off, though. But okay, now let's go to the NFL itself. Could it rig a game? And on paper, it feels like it would be a lot easier, right? Because let's do this chart again. You have the NFL, but there'd be a lot less people that need to know about this, right? The NFL could, in theory, go to just one ref, and that one ref could, rig a game. Seems a lot more simple, right? Well, okay, you couldn't just do one ref, right? You might need like 3 refs because different refs, work different games. So, you can't have one ref work every Chiefs game or it would be kind of suspicious, right? So you'd have to maybe mix it up a little bit. But still, you wouldn't have to let a ton of refs know about this. But here's one of the issues. The NFL isn't one thing, right? The NFL is comprised of a bunch of people. You have Roger Goodell, who's sort of at the quote-unquote top, but even he works for the owners. There's 32 owners above him, so that is kind of the chain of command. And to say if the NFL is going to rig games, first we have to talk about, well, who is the NFL? Is Roger Goodell rigging games, or are the owners rigging the games? And that's going to determine how we decide we want to rig this game. One thing that I have to mention at the top is there have been a lot of people who have said, oh, well, actually, the NFL, it would be legal for them to rig games because they are considered an entertainment league. That's something that I've heard people say. That is not true. The NFL would just as much be guilty of a crime if they rig games as someone who's gambling would. Yes, it is a entertainment league, but the way that that's been explained to me is that it's more of an antitrust thing. It's trying to argue that NFL is not a football monopoly because it's entertainment, and it's certainly not an entertainment monopoly. There's plenty of ways to watch entertainment, less ways to watch football. That's essentially why it's classified that way. It's this whole other lawsuit, but essentially it has nothing to do with rigging games. It would still be illegal to rig games. You cannot present a sporting league like this, pretend it is real, and then rig games. To make the WWE comparison, that is rigged, but they disclose it. They actually put out, things saying, yes, this is for entertainment, and this is not a real competition. This is a scripted competition. So because they say that, then they're allowed to do it. You have to disclose it. Otherwise, it's a crime, and it's harsher in some states than it would be in others. So once again, as we here are all rigging games, we are all risking jail time to do so. So let's talk about first the owners, and then let's talk about Goodell first, and then we'll talk about the owners. If Goodell wanted to rig a game, well, why? What would the benefit be for Goodell rigging a game? Well, it would be to rig games in a way that could make the league more money. If the league makes more money, then he looks better and he can get more money that way. So let's say he tips off some refs to make some calls go a certain way. That feels possible, right? The biggest issue that we would have if we are advising Goodell to try to rig this game, we're just trying to rig games. We have not for financial benefit. We're here for the chaos. So if we're trying to rig a game and we're advising Goodell on how to do it, the biggest hurdle he would have to overcome would be first, we'd have to get Goodell to want to do it, because I don't know if he would. In fact, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't. He has a lot of money. Why does he need this at this point and risk jail time and losing like the cushiest job in America? I don't know. But if we can convince him to do it, the biggest issue he would have is that there's 32 billionaires watching his every move. If he started taking private meetings with referees, people would notice that. That would be a thing that people would notice. It would be really difficult to do that without anyone noticing it. I think the best way he could do it is maybe go to a friend and get that friend to then maybe drive to the ref's house and without a paper trail, make things work that way. But if the owners don't want the games rigged, it would be difficult. Again, not impossible. I think the biggest hurdle would be getting Goodell to want to rig a game, but that would be the way you do it. The other hurdle you have is, we've already seen people talking about the Kansas City Chiefs and how many calls go their way, and it's worth mentioning, calls do go against them as well. In that Bills game that everyone freaked out about, the 4th down and 1 play, there was I think bigger missed call that hurt the Chiefs in that game, when there was a missed face mask that would have allowed the Chiefs to get in field goal range already up 5. Maybe they're able to get a touchdown and go up 2 scores and kind of ice the game there. They weren't able to do that, and the Bills were able to take the lead on the next possession. So just saying, like, people are already noticing this stuff. If you were really rigging the games and making more of it, people would notice it more. Owners would notice it more. They would look into it more, look into the official that is missing the calls, see do they have history with missing the calls. These are the hurdles we'll have to overcome if we are trying to rig a game that way. Because one of the issues, too, is you don't want to tell too many refs about it, because just think about it. If Goodell goes to a ref, and that ref is a whistleblower and tells everyone, Goodell's out of a job and going to jail. So you have to be a little bit more, careful with it, and because of that, you want to tell as little amount of people as possible, but when you tell as little amount of people as possible, those refs are the ones consistently missing the calls, because, again, the difference between this and gambling is you would need calls to go wrong pretty frequently, as opposed to gambling. You could just do one game if you wanted. But okay, that's if Goodell wanted to rig a game by himself without the owners knowing. But what if the owners didn't know? What if he was working with the owners and there's 33 people involved in rigging the games? The first benefit in this is, I'm just going to say, I don't think there's a real threat in them going to jail, because they're all billionaires, and billionaires don't really play by the same rules that the rest of us do. So I don't think that they would go to jail if they got caught doing this. Maybe there'd be one fall guy, but I think most of them would be okay. Now, the first thought that most of you are going to have when I suggest billionaires rigging the games is, well, there's 32 billionaires. Are they really going to rig games against their team? Is the Buffalo Bills owner cool with saying, oh, I guess we're rigging it for Kansas City? Oh, shucks, that stinks. Well, maybe. So the logic would be, if they really don't care about winning and only care about revenue, it's kind of, the logic is a rising tide raises all boats. Sure, the Bills would make more money this year going to a Super Bowl than losing a Super Bowl, but in the next 10 years, if the league gets better, all teams get better. And the Chiefs are actually an interesting example in this. The Chiefs are the team that has had, so much success since 2017 once Patrick Mahomes got there, but their valuation has raised by 43.3%. The average NFL team has raised by 44.4%. So you have a little over a 1% higher rate for the other teams than for the Kansas City Chiefs. So if you're the Bills, whatever helps the league ultimately does help you revenue-wise, which was surprising to me. I didn't expect that going in, but hey, I report the facts as I see them. I don't just report facts that support whatever argument I'm making, and I'm not even really making an argument in this video. I don't know. But motive in general is just kind of weird. It's always hard to figure out what people will do and why they will do it. But there is legitimate reason for the owners to want to rig games. The issue is just how many owners there are. Because, if we're assuming the league didn't start rigged back in the day, and this hasn't been an 100-year conspiracy, because that would be very difficult to pull off, if we're assuming this happened at some point, how would it go about happening? So one owner probably would have to go to the other 31 owners and say, hey, do you want to start rigging games? It feels like not all 31 would say yes to that, and it would at best get swept under the rug, and at worst become a major scandal. I think about some of the kind of wacky owners, like, okay, Jim Irsay is in on this. He's preparing for this. It would be difficult. Now, we're trying to pull it off. We don't have a choice. We have to try and rig a game this way. So we would have to go to each owner and hopefully pitch them on, hey, you will make more money. Again, pitching the Bills owner on letting the Chiefs consistently win Super Bowls is going to help all of us might be a difficult sell, because a lot of these owners are very competitive. I think you also get some people saying, hey, why don't we help out Dallas then? Because they're the biggest franchise and they would have stars if we got them in the Super Bowl a lot. Like Dak Prescott would become the Patrick Mahomes instead, right? You probably get some of that as well. Not to mention, okay, now 32 owners, Roger Goodell, and a bunch of refs know about this. We have to keep them all, making sure none of them squeal, none of them say something that they're not supposed to say. That would be difficult as well. And to be honest, there's other ways the owners can help put their thumb on the scale to make star players play in Super Bowls more, like rule changes that help out quarterbacks, which is something they already do. You can do it legally. They probably would just do it that way. So again, that would be our best play. Try to get all 32 owners to agree to it, say it can make them money, but would be just difficult to get all those people to agree and to ultimately pull that kind of thing off. But let's go back to the chart for one more second, because there is one other way that the NFL could be rigged that I've really never seen people talk about, but I actually think might be the easiest way to do it. So you have 32 owners over Goodell and then the refs underneath. But what if you didn't have all 32 owners agreeing to it? What if you just had Clark Hunt, the owner of the Chiefs, rigging games? Maybe paying off Goodell, who then pays off the refs to rig games in a certain way. And in fact, Goodell is worth $250 million. Clark Hunt's worth $2 billion. Okay, that's a pretty sizable jump, but still, these guys are both very well off. Maybe you can't pay off Goodell, but maybe you don't have to. Maybe Clark Hunt himself could just pay off the refs, and I almost think that if we really want to rig a game, this might be the best pathway. Now, of course, if I'm worried about Roger Goodell taking a meeting with an individual ref, I'm very worried about an owner taking a meeting with an individual ref. That just can't happen, period. But again, could you get a friend of a friend of a friend to talk to the refs and pay them off? And again, Clark Hunt's worth $2 billion. He could give a ref absolute life-changing money and never have to even, feel it. $2 billion is an absurd amount of money, right? He gives the ref $10 million to rig a game and get a Super Bowl appearance. This still helps Clark Hunt because he gets the extra revenue of being in a Super Bowl, right? Because it is worth mentioning the Chiefs, before Mahomes have gotten here, were one of the lowest revenue teams. They're now kind of more middle of the pack. So while they've still been below average in terms of the raising valuation, that's just because there's other teams that have raised it more. I assume if the Chiefs weren't winning Super Bowls, they would still be, at the bottom of the pack, right? Which is another reason why it'd be hard to get owners to agree to it. But you get what I'm saying. Clark Hunt would have a reason to want to, win more Super Bowls, as he's, I'm sure, is competitive, which is why he is, owning an NFL team. Obviously, it's a family thing. I get it. But, you know what I'm trying to say. There would be a motive there, and there would be a reason. And honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, even someone like Patrick Mahomes has enough money where he could, in theory, pay off a ref, right? It feels like that would probably be the easier way to do it. Although, again, just the biggest issue is, are you really willing to risk essentially everything you've worked for something like that? If Patrick Mahomes tried to pay off a ref and it failed and the ref went to Goodell and then, and Goodell and the owners aren't rigging games and they say, okay, well, that can't happen. Now you're suspended for life. Okay, that would not be worth it for Mahomes. For Clark Hunt, if he now has to be forced to sell the team, that would not be worth it. It's not worth the risk. There is a ton of downside only for legitimate upside, but that tends to be the case with every single one of these scenarios that we talked about, right? Is that technically you could, and again, motive is weird. People do things for weird motives all the time. That's again, the amount of money that Donaghy was making with the NBA is nowhere near as much as what he should have been risking it for. So things are weird, things happen. If I had to try and rig a game, I do think I'm going with trying to get an owner to directly pay off official. I think then maybe Goodell doing it without the owner's knowledge would be the next easiest way to do it. And then probably just the owners themselves somehow getting all together and doing it. And then gambling being kind of the least likely way to actually rig a game. Ultimately, my opinion kind of remains the same. I think the risk of being caught rigging a game far outweighs the benefits that you would get from rigging a game. And at the end of the day, all these people are very wealthy, so it's unlikely to, unlikely for you to want to do that. But sometimes people do weird things, so that is how I think it would happen if something like this happened. So I guess that's what to look out for. If you ever see Clark Hunt's, a friend of Clark Hunt's talking with one of the officials, maybe take a picture or something. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching. Oh, I meant to mention this earlier, but I'm sure there's things I've left out. I'm doing my best here, just one person. So if I did leave something out, let me know in the comments below. I always like when people do that. So yeah, those are my final thoughts. Goodbye.